Morning, I'd like to call the Portsmouth Port and Industrial Commission meeting for June 28, 2022, which is our annual meeting to order. Roll call vote, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Ppic,
I am here.
Ms. McSwain,
Present.
Mr. Parr,
Oh, here.
Ms. Rogers Garner, Mr. Williams,
Present.
Ms. Jackson, and Chair Allen.
Present.
Madam Chair, we do have a quorum.
Okay. We do have a new commissioner that has been appointed by City Council, Ms. Reniqua Jackson. I'm hopefully she's running just a tad bit late, so if she does make it today, we'll officially introduce her and welcome her when she arrives. We have the minutes for May 24th, 2022, our regular meeting minutes. Those have been sent out. I'd like a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call vote, please.
Yes, Ms. Ppic,
Yes.
Ms. McSwain,
Yes.
Mr. Parr,
Yes.
Mr. Williams,
Yes.
and Chair Allen.
Yes,
The minutes are adopted.
thank you. Moving forward to our financial report for May 2022, Mr. Shea. Good morning.
Good morning. I'll be presenting main financials for PPIC. What we have here is a statement of net position, kind of equivalent to balance sheet. So this is a comparative report to fiscal year 2021, which ends in June 30th, 2021. And this year's activity, the second column, it shows that there is no much change compared to the previous year, only $129 change in assets, which is cash. And if you go all the way to the bottom of this page, it's $129 total liabilities in that position. The second page is income statement, is only this year activity, and we compare that to previous year, and the change compared to previous year is only $652, which matched the change in that position. The next page is a year-to-date budget report. This is the year-to-date accumulative. So if you see only this month numbers, it's just a couple of dollars. Was only something in interest and in maintenance expenses, but the bottom line is that this year's activity is profitable for $653. The next page, this is a bank statement reconciliation. So if you have any question, I'll be glad to answer.
Any questions regarding our financial report? Hearing none. I do want to recognize that Ms. Reniqua Jackson has arrived. Good morning and welcome to the Portsmouth Port and Industrial Commission.
Good morning.
I'd also like to make sure that I recognize our interim city manager, Ms. Terry.
Hello.
Good
Good morning,
morning.
everybody.
Morning.
Moving forward to old business, court update. Good morning.
Good morning, Carolyn. Good morning, everybody. My name is Thomas Cross. Chris is out of town. I don't say he's in Maryland, but so I'm providing you a brief update this morning regarding the court. Some of you may have seen a year ago in May was our most productive month ever. We fast forward a year, supply chain problems. This past May was our most productive month ever, moving at 340,000 TEUs. Again, TEU is a 20 equivalent unit. Essentially what you'd see on the back of a tractor trailer is a 40 equivalent unit. So take that 340,000 number, divided by 2, that's about as many tractor trailers as you saw move through the port in the month of May. We built on that. The month of April was our second most productive month ever. Came out of March, that was our third most productive month ever. So we've got a pretty good progression going. Businesses are coming to Virginia because we offer that certainty and predictability to move their goods. So while supply chain's been an issue for the country, we've been fortunate to have, frankly, the capacity and technology to move those products. And frankly, it's thanks to good work by folks like yourself, the General Assembly, and people putting their faith in the port to continue doing that work. So again, 3 months, March, April, May most productive period in the port's entire history. So what do we do with that? Well, you got to keep your foot on the gas. We are continuing to invest in infrastructure, NIT North, Norfolk International Terminals. So the next big project, we optimized big International Gateway. I want to say that was completed in 2018. Work at Portsmouth Marine Terminals continuing for offshore wind. So you should see construction there soon. And then building on that, so you've got a great asset with the port and it's doing well. What companies are looking for is, do you have the gateway? So not only do you have the port that can move the goods, but do you have the infrastructure network? Do you have the roads that can move it? Do you have the distribution centers? Do you have the warehousing to handle that capacity? And so I think that's where we're focused on, is not only the terminal capacity, but being able to move it through Virginia to the Midwest and get it to those captive markets where we can say, hey, we are your lowest cost option. Stay with us for the long term, and in turn, more business then comes to Virginia, writing more jobs, more investment. So we're focused on that. Another thing General Assembly came out with, I believe, is an inland port study. You've seen in Georgia, they've had a lot of pop-up ports to try and handle capacity. So they want us to study doing that in Southwest Virginia and Southside Virginia. As many of y'all know, the lowest cost of transportation is by water. That's why shipping is by water. The next is by rail, and then obviously trucks a little bit more expensive. But you can get freight by rail to Southwest Virginia. You offer a lower cost option to get goods to the Midwest. So again, good things happening. Thankful for y'all's work, and I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I've seen the cruise ship here. Does that have anything to do with the repair and then them bringing stuff back and forth for that purpose?
So we do not do cruise. We are only container terminals. I guess we do in Newport News, they do a little bit of ro-ro, which is roll on, roll off like your cars, but massive cruise ship, I want to say that's Nauticus. I believe he used to work on a cruise ship back in the day and somehow established that relationship, because I think this summer is probably the most cruises we've seen
Right.
in the
back
entire
out of
history of the
pandemic.
area.
Yeah, so I didn't know if that was just goods or services being brought in to load those, or, I know that they do repair, not at port, but
Yeah.
they do some of the repair for the longshoremen stuff, but I didn't know if that had anything to do with the frequency of how busy you all have been over the last couple
No.
of months.
We're very supportive of the cruise line from here, but it's not something that's focused for our business. I know, to your point, there are stevedores and I believe longshoremen that do work to ensure that that cruise is filled up with goods and what it needs to go to sea, but it's not our purview.
Yeah, y'all just lucky, right?
Mhm.
Everybody's shopping from Amazon.
That's right. That's
Okay.
right.
Mr. Parr?
When is dredging, the final stages of dredging supposed to begin?
So it looks like, that's a great question. Another one of the things that was a great example of federal and state investment in the port was, there was a study done 30 years ago on dredging, and Virginia naturally had deep harbors already. But by the end of 2024, early 2025, you will have the deepest harbor on the East Coast. We used to have it. Charleston took the title a couple of years ago. But by end of 24-25, we will have the deepest harbor on the East Coast. And more importantly, we'll have two-way traffic for ultra-large container vessels. I mean, why that's important right now, when one of those ships comes in, it is only one-way traffic. So it is just large vessel, coordinates with the Navy, with the Coast Guard, and transits in for a couple hours. No math expert, but I imagine like any standard road, if you can have traffic going two ways, that increases your efficiency a bit. So end of 24, beginning of 25, that project was a 50-50 cost share between the state and federal government. So the federal funding just being committed, I'll say a month or two ago. Sorry.
Loss of signal. How deep Is it going to be?
55
No,
feet.
excuse
Hold on
me,
one second.
you have to wait till you hear it.
Just a moment. We'll make an announcement.
You know you did.
Yeah.
We good, Ms. Cronin? Okay. We temporarily lost our signal, but we did not have any further discussions while the signal was lost. Mr. Cross.
So again, yeah, the inner harbor will go to 55 feet. I want to say it's the Pimple Shoals Channel will go to 58, and then the Atlantic Ocean Channel goes to 59 feet. And again, and that provides so we can handle these larger ships that we're building that carries more goods and reflects the economies of scale. But the good news story of that was the federal portion of the dredging that came is the first federal project partnership agreement using IIJA funds, Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act funds. So there was a little announcement about a month and a half ago regarding that, but again, excited for that and it's good for Virginia.
Mr. Williams, you have a question?
No.
Any other questions for Mr. Cross? Hearing none, thank you so much, Mr. Cross, for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, Mr. Donahue with the PPIC Incentive Program.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This is a revisit to the Job Creation Grant program that the board desired to develop and create with staff. We're bringing the guidelines, the formal guidelines, back before you for a final review and approval to allow for staff to begin moving forward with preparing for the program's launch in the coming fiscal year. These guidelines were developed by staff and in cooperation with a committee that the PPIC established, which included Ms. Rogers-Garner and Mr. Williams. So these guidelines were prepared by the committee and have been reviewed previously by the board, but I did want to go through them. They were included in your packet, which was sent out on Friday. But if I could take some time just to review, hit on some high points. I have a few slides that we'll run through, and then we'll talk about next steps for moving forward. So again, the program is the PPIC Job Creation Grant Program. This was modeled very similar to the state enterprise zone program for job creation. So a lot of our structure and language is directly related to the state's program. But this is citywide and is not limited to the enterprise zone. So all businesses that qualify can participate. The objective is to provide new and expanding existing Portsmouth-based businesses in the industrial and port-related industry sectors with financial assistance for the creation of new positions that provide employees living wages. That was something that the board was very adamant about, supporting living wages, and you will see as we work through this that we do identify how we're going to do that. The eligibility guidelines are as follows. The program is available to businesses and projects with a minimum qualified new capital investment of $5 million. This was a threshold that was established due to the fact that we felt there was a need to identify a major investment in the city from an economic development standpoint that would trigger an incentive. That is how that value was determined. Businesses that can participate in the program must operate within one of the following targeted industry sectors, including maritime, distribution and logistics, offshore wind, and advanced manufacturing. Those are some target industry sectors for the Economic Development Office, and ones that the PPIC have identified as being in demand and worthy of consideration for the program. The businesses, of course, must be located within the city of Portsmouth. The program is not available to units of local, state, or federal government or nonprofit organizations. The grant parameters for the program include the provision of a one-time grant award equal to $500 per position for qualified positions earning at least 175% of the Virginia minimum wage, and $800 per position for qualified positions earning at or above 200% of the Virginia minimum wage. Again, we are tying this to the state's minimum wage, which does have a escalation provision in the future, and we have a slide that we'll get to that will identify that. Qualifying positions are net new permanent full-time jobs exceeding a 4-job threshold during the grant year, not to exceed 100 new positions. So the grant year is essentially defined as the first full calendar year of employment for these new jobs that will be created. Qualified positions must also provide health benefits. These are jobs that cannot be transferred from another locality to the city of Portsmouth or from elsewhere within the Commonwealth of Virginia. We have in economic development, somewhat of an unwritten rule that we do not incentivize businesses moving from one locality to another. We always do compete, I think, on many different levels, but one thing we historically have not done is incentivize relocating a business from another community within the Commonwealth. And then again, the grant term is a 1-year period, beginning with the first full calendar year following the award of the grant. In terms of the grants calculation, the awards are determined by the number of net new positions created, the wages paid, and the number of months positions were filled during the grant year. Grants are available up to $500 per grant eligible position, filled by an employee earning at least 175% of the Virginia minimum wage, and up to $800 per grant eligible position filled by an employee earning 200% of Virginia minimum wage. And again, the grant can provide funding for up to 100 newly created positions maximum. The grant awards could be prorated depending upon positions that were not in existence for the entire calendar year. We will move to the next slide, which gives, I think, a good funding scenario and example of how the program could be utilized, and give you some financial scenarios at different levels. The Virginia minimum wage is currently $11 an hour, effective as of January of 2022. That will be increasing in 2023 to $12 an hour. $13.50 will be the new wage in 2025, and then ultimately $15 in 2026. So the intent would be for these wages to change annually as the Virginia minimum wage changes as well. So you have a breakdown here of a couple scenarios for the 175% Virginia minimum wage, and also at 200%. So you're talking about a wage of $19.25 an hour at 175%, and $22 an hour at 22%. So based on these calculations, the PPIC could be awarding anywhere between a maximum of $50,000 to $80,000 potentially, based on the jobs that were created. We can move to the next slide. Talk about some of the employment requirements. Again, these are tied to net new permanent full-time positions, and we're going to define that as a person employed by a business or firm who's normally scheduled to work at full-time, scheduled based on the following criteria: a minimum of 35 hours per week for the entire normal year of the business firm's operations, which a normal year must consist of at least 48 weeks. A minimum of 35 hours per week for a portion of the taxable year in which an employee was initially hired or transferred to the business, or a minimum of 1,680 hours per year if the standard fringe benefits are paid by the business firm for the employee. In terms of ineligible employees, positions paid less than 175% of the Virginia minimum wage are ineligible. I do want to note that in your guidelines that you received in your packet, there was a misprint And we will need to modify that to reflect a change on page 3 under the ineligible employees. The first bullet point references the federal minimum wage. That needs to actually read, as I just stated, that the positions are reflective of Virginia minimum wage at $19.25 an hour. Positions that were not offered health insurance coverage equal to at least 50% of the health insurance premium are ineligible. And then positions not meeting the defined full-time definition are ineligible as well. Seasonal, temporary, leased, or contracted positions are ineligible. And again, positions that have previously existed elsewhere in Virginia would not qualify. As would positions created by a business that's simultaneously closing or downsizing other facilities in the state of Virginia, those would be ineligible. And a person that was employed in the same job function in Virginia by a related party or a trade or business under common control. This includes positions filled by a business that was then purchased by another taxpayer who continued its operation not new to Virginia would be ineligible. In regards to the application process, completed job creation grant applications are to be submitted to the Portsmouth Economic Development Office for review and are not considered submitted if incomplete. Completed applications, which will require all necessary documentation, will be reviewed to determine completion status and adherence with the program guidelines. Following that determination, the applications will be considered by the PPIC Board of Commissioners, and approval or denial of an application lies within the discretion of the PPIC Board of Commissioners. Finalizing completed grant application approved, the applicant will move into a grant agreement with the PPIC, agreeing to accept the grant funds approved by the commission and not to exceed the funding amounts permitted under the program. The grant agreement will establish the conditions of approval in terms of grant disbursement. Documentation of grant creation during the grant year will be required before the grant funds are to be dispersed. Those documentation items will be reviewed and determined by staff to be in compliance with the program. We would calculate the grant and then it would be paid out following the end of that calendar year. So those are the guidelines for the program that have been developed. In terms of next steps, we would be looking for adoption of these guidelines today. Then, of course, including funding for the program in your budget. There is a line item currently with a placeholder of $50,000, which we'll review this morning, provided for the program in your budget. And then staff would work to develop the program materials and then launch the program after the start of the school year. Happy
Thank
to
you.
answer questions.
First, I'd like to thank Commissioner Williams and Vice Chair Gardner for their work on the program along with economic development staff. So it's greatly appreciated. Any questions in regards to the program? I'd also like to acknowledge Councilman Moody's here this morning. Good morning, Councilman.
Good to be here.
Hearing no questions, like a motion and a second for approval of the PPIC incentive program.
I move to adopt the program as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Mr. Parr.
I think it's excellent.
Mhm.
$50,000 compared to the 5 million capital investment is 1%. Seems like a drop in the bucket, but there are scouts from so many industries crawling all over Hampton Roads looking for opportunities. And I think this is just one more thing to sweeten the deal and bring sustainable development to Portsmouth. So I think it's, I applaud Mr. Donahue and his team and the commissioners for putting this together. I think it's excellent.
Mhm.
Any other discussion, comments? Hearing
Well
none?
presented.
Thank you. Hearing no further comments or discussion, move for roll call vote, please.
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. Buffet,
Yes.
Ms. McSwain.
Yes.
Mr. Parr,
Yes.
Mr. Williams,
Yes.
Ms. Jackson,
Yes.
and Chair
Yes,
Allen.
yes.
The guidelines are adopted as presented.
All right. Next up, quick question. Should we discuss Star-Based Victory before we discuss the budget?
Oh, we can, yes.
If no one has any concerns about modifying the agenda, I think we should discuss Star-Based Victory prior to discussing the budget, because part of the discussion about Star-Based Victory affects the budget. Any concerns about that?
No.
Okay, Mr. Parr, Star-Based Victory.
Wonderful. So Commissioner Bethea and I had a meeting with representatives from Starbase as well as the port last week, and we were able to come to an agreement where Starbase and the port will present a plan to us for financial and otherwise, support, and in addition to us getting partners, maritime partners, to support this as well. And rather than necessarily bringing children to the port, because you run up against issues with safety, legal compliance, things like that, the amazing educators had an idea of bringing the port to the schools and bringing the port to the kids. Just throwing out some ideas, a 40-foot container that has a model of the port inside made out of Legos where the kids can play. And you may know Lego has just closed on a facility in Chesterfield. And they'll most likely be using port facilities to move the little plastic bricks. Lots of ideas. We're going to leave it up to the seasoned educators to come back with a really innovative plan for us. And we've put a budget line item for $50,000 in this year's budget. But of course, we will be leveraging our relationship with the port and other industrial partners here in Portsmouth to make this a reality and be able to affect kids from kindergarten all the way up through high school when they have the opportunity to do CTE programs, longshoremen internships, things like that. So we really think we can make an impact.
Wonderful. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, it was a great meeting, and the ideas they came up with was very innovative, like Bracy stated. So we look forward to the next meeting.
Okay, thank you both for taking the lead on this. As a former school board member, this is important to me as well. So, Mr. Dunham.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to express the excitement surrounding the discussion that was had when we met last week. From a economic development and workforce development standpoint, this is exactly the type of thing that we need to be doing to encourage our students, our youth, to explore career opportunities and pathways for skilled trades. We have a huge demand in our region, in our state, in our city for jobs that are related not just to the port, but also manufacturing industries, the new potential for offshore wind, our maritime ship repair and fabrication industries. There are an amazing number of well-paying jobs available. And I think it's really critical that we work our way into the public school system to share these opportunities with the youth. And this is, I think, an excellent way to do that. So I commend the PPIC for your interest participating in the process and finding a way to do that. I think it's certainly a worthwhile and valuable way to use your resources.
Absolutely. All right, so we will need, were we doing a vote on that? We don't have to vote on that at this point.
I don't believe there's any formal action necessary. When we get
Come
to
back
the
to the
budget, the budget will have a line item for the program that we put in as a called a placeholder. And I think what we look to do in the future as the group meets and discusses Starbase would be to develop almost a memorandum of of understanding between the parties as far as what will be occurring and what everybody's role will be.
Okay.
So that would be the next step.
Okay. At this point, we will now move to our FY 2023 budget. Treasurer Bethea?
So I don't think that because we went over the budget last meeting, so I think the main components was the grant and then the star-based placeholder that we put in there. So I think we'll be able to vote on it today, right, Mr. Donnelly?
Yes, I believe so. I think the budget was reviewed by line at your main meeting. I did want to note that the finance department did make a few edits to the budget. However, that was just, I think, some changes with historical information, not with what your proposed annual funding is for the upcoming fiscal year. I believe there were some audited actuals that need to be updated just to reflect the actual numbers, most recent audit. Just wanted to share that. But otherwise, the only modifications were, as you stated, the job creation grant at $50,000 and Star-Based Victory being included at $50,000.
Okay. I need a motion and a second for approval of the FY 23 budget.
So
Not everybody wants.
So moved.
Thanks.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Do it all.
Any discussion?
I could just, the second was.
The second
by
was Mr. Swain.
Ms. McSwain. Okay.
Any discussion? Move for a roll call vote, please.
Yes, Ms. Bethea,
Yes.
Ms. McSwain.
Yes.
Mr. Parr,
Yes.
Mr. Williams,
Yes.
Ms. Jackson,
Yes.
Chair Allen.
Yes,
Motion is adopted. Budget is approved.
wonderful. We do not have any closed meeting items to discuss. Items submitted by commissioners. I have no items submitted by commissioners. Report backs.
I don't have any report backs. I do have one announcement, and that is an introduction that I'd like to make, introducing our newest team member to the PPIC board, and that is Sandra Briggs.
Welcome.
Sitting here just behind me. She is our new workforce development specialist. She just joined the office, Portsmouth at Work Center in June. So this is her first month here on the team. We've been really fortunate to have her here. I know Ms. Broom, who she's working to support, has been appreciative of the fact that she's got some help over here with all that's going on. And we're really excited to have her here.
Welcome.
Welcome.
We are still continuing to grow, so we do have some positions that we're in the process of interviewing candidates for, and hopefully at our next meeting we may have some new team members on board as well. So we'll keep you posted on that.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
And that was all.
Okay, I did want to bring up the option of not having a potential July meeting, and your thoughts on that. I know July tends to be a busy travel time and there's a lot going on. So I wanted to take a consensus of the board on not having a July meeting.
I will be in Puerto Rico, so
Oh,
Yes.
I
I didn't think about it, and now I'm looking. Yeah.
Okay. Ms. McSwain, your thoughts?
Oh, I'm fine with it.
Mr. Williams?
I'm okay.
Ms. Jackson?
Okay.
Treasurer
Yeah, I'll be in
Bethea?
Vegas, so yeah, I'm just not having a meeting.
We're not gonna have a forum anyway.
Yeah.
So at this point, we will not be having a July meeting,
Okay.
as it fell on vacation.
Very good. Noted, and we will plan accordingly.
Okay. If there are no other business to take care of, this meeting is adjourned.